Joe Higgins. Deputy Joe Higgins.
Yes, Count Corley.
Deputy Joe Higgins without interruption, please. Deputy Ring, you're not the leader of the technical group. Deputy Joe Higgins. Allow Deputy Joe Higgins without interruption, please.
Good morning, Count Corley. Taoiseach, can I ask you if you feel ashamed or in any way humiliated that a multinational construction company, GAMA, believes it can, in the year 2005, in the Ireland which you claim to lead, set out to starve its Turkish workers into abandoning their fight for the wages which it stole from them, with the same arrogance and cruelty that William Martin Murphy and his cohorts treated the Dublin working class during the infamous lockout of 1913. Now, the hidden wages which we fished out of a bank in Amsterdam are being transferred to family accounts, but there's a long way to go. But that actually is only a minority portion of what the workers are owed. Outstanding is the massive overtime for the 84-hour weeks which they routinely worked. And outstanding is the fixed wage employees who worked those hours also, but for an incredible €800 per month, for whom there are no wages in Amsterdam. GAMA criminally gave no wage slips. GAMA criminally shredded timesheets. Now, Taoiseach, will you ask the Minister for Trade and Employment immediately to employ a cohort of accountants with proper authority to process this massive overtime bill and to serve it immediately within days? And as GAMA callously cuts off the food to its workers in stoppage and has threatened to evict them, will you demand that that doesn't happen and see that it doesn't happen? And will you cover them with bridging social welfare payments? And lest any eyebrows be raised about that, can I tell you that the state and semi-state projects which GAMA won has saved the state at least €30 million, by contrast with the next highest bids, who lost out to GAMA, based of course on their exploitation regime. So I'm afraid that this money is owed. Now lastly, Taoiseach, I read the other day that the new Pope has asked his flock to pray for him, that I may not flee for fear of the wolves. What we want to know is whether you and the government are going to stand up to this ravenous wolf called GAMA, which is looming over the construction industry in Ireland, threatening vulnerable workers, migrant workers, and by extension threatening the rights and conditions of all workers. Will you stand up to them and from today and ensure that this scandal ends forthwith?
Well, Count Corley, I think as the Deputy knows, and he's worked with us on this over the last number of months, we have been endeavoured to deal with the outstanding issues, all of the outstanding issues and all the points that he made. There are two separate the disputes we're dealing with presently, Count Corley. One is to complete the work that we've been at for several weeks, is to get the legal advisors, who are our only contact with GAMA at present. I'd say to the Deputy, it's our only source of contact. It's not the best way of having to deal with an issue, but that's the way that's the way we're forced to deal with, to try to bring resolutions to these issues. We're trying to bring verification and an acceptable process with regard to the transfer of funds for the personal accounts of the GAMA workers. We're engaged in doing that, Count Corley. A number of them have been done, including those who've returned to Turkey. Certain issues were raised with the company last week, and we're waiting for a response to that. So that part is underway. The second issue is the Deputy Higgins has raised regarding the overtime sheets, the excessive hours that we're working and the difficulties around that. The representatives of the workers, it's an IR issue, which I think the Labour Relations Commission, there's about 100 workers involved in that aspect. It's 118 in the first one, about 100 in the second one. And I think, Count Corley, we're endeavouring to try to make progress in that. But I do say to Deputy Higgins, I think if we could get that into the Labour Relations Commission would help We've no problem doing the things you've said about trying to help in the verification process, but it is an IR issue, and we have to try and deal with the labour issue. On the third issue, Count Corley, I understand the welfare issue has been looked at. I would hope that I'm told, but we need it again to be clear, that the issues of food and accommodation, because the workers were getting these facilities from the company, that they would not be evicted and the company wouldn't dare to do that. I have already made that position very clear to the legal representatives of the company, and do so again here today, that it's not acceptable to do that. So, Count Corley, the Minister on a daily basis is involved with this. Some of the people in my own department on the social partnership process are also being involved on a daily basis, and on all of. In some of the cases, some of the workers are finished their work, and there's disputes around that as well, and that issue has been dealt with as well. Because there's about 1,000 GAMA workers in the country, so while I'm talking about two lots of 118 and 100, obviously we're watching what's happening in the broader GAMA workforce as well.
Deputy Joe Higgins.
Well, no worker should go anywhere, certainly not back to Turkey, until they get the money that's owed to them, or they will never see it. That's quite clear. Now, with typical generosity, working people throughout this country are hugely supporting the GAMA workers. They were cheered by residents from the Ballymun flats the other day as they marched seeking justice. And the government has to live up to this expectation that all working people have, that justice is done. Monies that are due to GAMA from the state or semi-state contracts should be frozen immediately and sequestered if necessary to pay for the overtime that is due. Now, you didn't say, Taoiseach, I want you to say more definitively that the workers need day-to-day spending money. And I want you to say that the food should be restored and will be restored forthwith, because that is a major issue. Now, SIPTU has come to the rescue in the short term, which is very good, but that's not a solution. And isn't it incredible, Taoiseach, that the only experience of Irish laws that these migrant workers have experienced is the flouting of it by the company that brought them here on the invitation of the Taoiseach, and that further this company can hire the most expensive lawyers in Dublin with the unpaid wages of the workers to get High Court protection from preventing the truth of exploitation regime coming into the open by blocking the report of the Labour Inspectorate, which did very good work in this regard. So please, to summarise, can you come back to us on the issue of the food, on the issue of welfare payments, and the issue of accountants being applied immediately?
Briefly, I've said we've encouraged the parties to dispute to use the IR machinery to deal with the overtime issue, and whatever assistance and help we can give, we're already doing that. In relation to the people receiving their money, we've already a large amount of people working on that and identifying what is due. I didn't say, Deputy, and I don't think you accused me of it, but that people shouldn't leave the country, but there are a number gone already. So it's to get their money back. They've gone themselves, so that is the issue. In relation to the food, Count Corley, I understand as of now, and I've already made it clear, SIPTU are working and helping in that regard, but I've said in accommodation they shouldn't be removed from the accommodation. In relation to the workers coming to the country, Count Corley, the Deputy knows well that a few years ago, when price inflation and major contracts was zooming up, everybody in this House was calling for us to try to open up our contracts and attract more people into the country, and it was a big issue in this House. So it's not a question of me or the Taoiseach or any other minister. The country was trying to get on with infrastructure problems, and we're trying to get people in. But when they come in here, they have to follow proper law and proper basis, and the Labour Inspectorate of this have worked very hard to get to the bottom of this. Ministers worked very hard on it. I acknowledge Higgins' role in all of this, and we'll continue to do that to make sure that the 1,000 GAMA workers in this country are properly looked after.
And there we leave Leaders' Questions. Listening to that, David McCullough and Brian Dáil. Brian, let's start with that issue raised, the GAMA workers, by Joe Higgins, who's made the running on this. I mean, there was very little evidence of any concern on the part of Bertie Ahern or anybody until Joe Higgins raised this, and yet we had the Taoiseach telling the Dáil that Joe Higgins has been working. We've been working with the deputy in recent months on this.
I think there were more than a few eyebrows raised when the Taoiseach used that particular phrase, because I mean, anybody who's been following this and looking at Taoiseach's questions over recent weeks and since this issue has come into the public domain, Joe Higgins has been almost like trying to drag blood from a stone in terms of getting information piece by piece by piece, week in, week out. It's hardly as though there was anybody in the government ran and embraced this issue and sort of wanted to make it their own. They have literally been pushed and dragged into dealing with it by Joe Higgins, and it still remains a very difficult issue because there's a bigger picture here, which is that the government effectively brought in companies like this for the major infrastructure projects that we have, and now you have a company who have flouted laws all over the place, and there are very serious issues involved in this.
And David, really no satisfaction for Joe Higgins on the specific issues that he raised there about some help for the GAMA workers?
Not really. I mean, the Taoiseach was quite strong in saying that he would hope, he didn't go further than that, but he would hope that the workers wouldn't be evicted and that the company wouldn't dare to turn them out of the company-owned accommodation that they're in. And he said he'd made that clear to the legal representatives of GAMA that would not be acceptable at all. So quite strong words, but whether it'll be backed up by any action or not is the question that I think Joe Higgins was looking for the answer.